Started.
All right, I'd like to welcome back everyone after this break. So welcome to the continuation of our National AA Technology Virtual Gathering 2020 on Saturday, September the 12th. My name is Carolyn and I'm an alcoholic. Let's start with a moment of silence to be used as you wish. Thank you. In keeping with our 11th tradition, we respectfully ask that AA speakers and AA members not be photographed, videotaped, or identified by full name on audio tapes or in any published or broadcast reports of our meetings, including those reports on the internet or other news media technologies. The assurance of anonymity is essential in our efforts to help other problem drinkers who may wish to share our recovery program with us. Our tradition of anonymity also reminds us that AA principles come before personalities. All session audio and screen share content is being recorded. NAATW will not publish anyone's last name or face. If you hear a last name, please let us know so we can scrub it in post-processing. We've set up a virtual hospitality suite in a separate Zoom room and a Slack participant communication. We've also created a Google Doc for crowdsourced notes. If you have a question, please submit it using the form we've created. It is organized by session name and gives you the opportunity to choose the person it is intended for. We'll read as many questions as we can during any free time between the presentation and the end of the session. To make sure we stay on schedule, we'll finish a few minutes before the end of the time slot to allow the next presenter to get ready. Hosts, co-hosts, and presenters are listed in Zoom with a hashtag in front of their name, so they will appear at the top of the participants list. Links to all of the things I've just mentioned will be posted in the chat and are also available at naatw.org/2020-links. Participants will be muted during the presentation, and chat between participants will be turned off. You can always chat to our hosts, and if you have a technical question, please chat to hashtag help, Daniel or Joel, and they'll be happy to chat you back. Participants are invited to share their video and display virtual backgrounds. If your video is not shared in a respectful manner, however, it will be disabled. Okay, so for our next session, we have a presentation by Buck R. from Lewes, Delaware, on protecting our traditions through an informed group conscience. So I'm just going to get Buck's presentation ready, and I invite Buck to have the floor.
Hey everybody, I'm Buck, I'm alcoholic. Nice to see you. I cannot believe that the things I just heard at the last session and the session before that, you all are absolutely amazing. I spent my morning with my Area 12 Assembly as we did our biannual area inventory, and I was listening. Then I came here and I heard all the remarks, all the things people were sharing, and I'm going, my goodness gracious, this is some group of people. I'd like to thank the NAATW Organizing Committee, especially Carolyn and Lois, for allowing me to participate in this year's virtual gathering. I heard a comment a few minutes ago, and I too would rather be in the Seattle area drinking one of the many coffees that they have there. And maybe next year we'll be able to all get together and do that. Certainly from a technology standpoint, the ongoing discussion during the pandemic is about how do we conduct AA meetings virtually using hybrid formats, as well as how do we safely collect 7 tradition monies. But I'm not going to be focusing on just that. I've been asked to focus on a couple of other things. And you know, there's a lot of information out there. And as a member of this year's program committee, I was also absolutely amazed at the news of who's doing what, where they're doing it, and who they're doing it to. The members of NAATW have certainly risen to the occasion. Behind me, my background is The Matrix, not because I was in the movie, but because the Matrix signifies to me what the best of NAATW and TIAA are about. The matrix is something that constitutes the place or point from which something else originates, takes form, or develops. And that's what I'm seeing, that's what I'm hearing. And in this inventory this morning, you know how the book says, you know, life will take on new meaning? Well, not only will life take on new meaning, but in the established service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, groups, meetings, whatever, words like accessibility, special needs, they've taken on new meaning too. So the questions that I beg to ask today are begged with respect, with love and admiration. One of the subjects that we were constantly brought back to in the program committee this year was, are we sure that what will be presented and what we're doing outside of these get-togethers are the best for AA? Let's go to the first slide. Lois, could you, okay.
Am I on the right slide, Buck? I'm sorry.
You are there, you're there. Stand by, stand by.
Okay.
We have heard and we have seen that even during stay-in-place orders, newcomers have arrived at our virtual doorstep. And we've been trying to accomplish 12-step calls as best we can. Not only do we have meetings, we have 12-step calls. Are we making sure that in this arena, we're doing what's best for AA members and our groups? Are we respecting the traditions? This will be the core. Are the traditions inconvenient when using technology? Are we attempting, or are we actually respecting our members' anonymity? There are vendors who serve us, helping to serve us, to collect seventh tradition monies, that create lists. They sell lists. Is anonymity an issue, or is it an inconvenience? Do we stop and ask, is this solution safe, secure, and good for AA as a whole? Or do we consider if our solution is good, bad, right, or wrong? Maybe, in fact, we should be asking, is this a healthy solution for the good of the fellowship? Case in point, groups have been doing for 85 years what groups have been doing, but we've gotten some, from the committee, we've gotten some questions and some discussion items. I love the conversation about the 501c3. Books have been written on that. At any level, when electing a treasurer, does a person collect collect the cash and put it in a box? Or do they deposit the monies in their own personal bank account and have its own, or does the group have its own bank account? The question that begs to be asked is the money safe? Next slide, please. We were asked then in the committee, with over 85 years experience on these issues and published guidelines to help us, has anybody read the financial guidelines that are published by AA? Here's the link. The short version is, when a treasurer uses their own personal bank account, the group, the donors, the group, they're at the risk of a theft, liens, and death. It happens all the time. Something's going to happen, and if it happens, it's one of those three. Time after time, we hear about groups dealing with such sad things, and I have to always go to the phrase, our problems are of our own making. Are we ensuring, even if it's a small meeting, if it's a club, an unincorporated community group, there's a bank, a savings and loan, even a credit union that will open up an account if you really search out and find it. But I've given you the link to the financial guidelines, and there's something to read because they're also something that you may want to consider to implement. Next slide, please. One of the members of leadership was telling me the other night, prior to the speakers get together, that he was aware that it was really tough to get a bank account for a meeting, a group, a club, or any of those things. It's not. Here's the link to go to the Internal Revenue Service to get an EIN, an employer ID number. That doesn't mean you're an employer. It means you get a number. And two people who have Social Security numbers would need to give their information. One is the main person who's going to get this application in, which takes 7 minutes. And the other, which is in case something happens to the other person, there'll be somebody else that they can talk to. There are lists on the first page of all the different kinds of companies that you can be. But down at the bottom, there's a little button that says, View Additional Types. Click that button. When you click that button, all you have to do is select community and volunteer groups, fill out the rest of it, and you'll have an EIN number within 24 hours to the email of your choice. Next slide, please. The safety card for AA groups is the safety of all AA members. You might want to take a look at that, because what we're talking about now, and what I'm hearing from everybody that's talked, and I love the trio of Royce, Monica, and Ginger. I mean, that's fascinating. And the young lady who, you know, I think it was Ginger who was talking about, you know, hearing and, you know, we in Area 12, even though we're far away from DC, we could hear what you were saying, and that's not a joke. We went to Gallaudet College, the University for the Deaf in Washington, DC, and asked for help in Zoom meetings that would allow us, by the way, to interact. And Gallaudet is another source that nobody talks to. The Internal Revenue Service is a source that nobody talks to. I'm just giving you some information that comes from previously established guidelines and previously established traditions that at this morning's assembly in Delaware, we were talking about 3 primary situations: COVID, and anything else that was related to the COVID. Everything that we're talking about today is about COVID. And the reaction is, what happens if it doesn't go away? What happens if this is the new reality? Next slide, please. The brochure Self-Support Where Money and Spirituality Mix is a big brochure. It's about self-support and how we pay our service boards and the other entities, like for rent, you know, and if you have, you know, have donuts or bagels or whatever it is. This talks about how we collect and what we do. But it was written before COVID. And so a lot of the articles that we still have for such things as the financial guidelines and the internet guidelines, which is now on this slide, says exactly what we're looking for and how we best implement to have another layer of consideration that we normally don't have when we're in the marketplace conducting business in a for-profit arena. That's not us. Next slide, please. Some members of our group want to pass a virtual basket, and the answer always comes up. The number of groups have utilized digital platforms long before COVID. I mean, this is not new stuff, but the questions are new in the sense that we're looking at whole meetings using virtual technology. So yes, there's Venmo, there's PayPal, there's others to facilitate the service. But the first issue that comes up is after either the technologist, the web person, the person who knows about this in the group says, I know about this, and they get all this information. The first question is, are you having a group conscience? And are you telling people, this is what's available and this is what's the risk? Experience suggests that the treasurer is a likely choice to handle digital contributions, but not always the right choice. You may want to elect an assistant treasurer or somebody in the meeting or group that does this and collects the money this way and reports to the treasurer. We as trusted servants always have somebody to report to. This would assist all the group members to say, not just all in favor say aye, but to make the right choice, the healthy choice for what the group wants to do. I'm aware of, and I'm sure some of you are too, that there are meetings who actually have a bank account in the meeting's name, but the meeting is using a technology source to collect seventh tradition monies, and they're using someone's personal Venmo or their personal PayPal account and then transferring it over. Same rules apply. If somebody is handling it personally, if they die, if they steal, if there's a lien, the group is out of money. Even if it costs more, AA pays its own way. Slide, please. Ellen, next slide, please. Let's go back one. Let's go back one more. There we go. To understand the role of the treasurer, let's go back one more. Sorry. Where'd you go?
Sorry, Buck, it was ignoring me. I had it on sort of a screen slideshow kind of mode, and it wouldn't let me break out of it. I apologize for that.
Okay.
Let me just hop back here. Oh, no, it's not letting me do it still. I'm so sorry.
Let's go back one more.
Okay, is it back? I apologize, Buck, so much. Or we're
Next
back
slide,
on
please.
page 3. Okay.
Next slide. Next slide. This one talks about the fact that after somebody runs off the money, what do you do? And here are some links that you may want to take a look at. And there's service material from the General Service Office, actually about the seventh tradition at virtual meetings. You may want to take a look at it. Some of the best that I've seen is also the New York Intergroup's best practices. In Delaware, we have what's known as the box of technology that talks about what's available and what the risks are. Green light, yellow light, red light. Take a look at that. And we also really enjoy, and share this a lot, the platforms from the San Francisco Marin Intergroup that have done a terrific job. Next slide, please. How bad is it? There's a recent letter from Greg T., the general manager of AAWS, that is posted on the Delaware website, and some of you may or may not have seen it. What it's basically said is that what's dire is not as dire as we thought. There was good contributions to the General Service Office in June, and there was good contributions to the General Service Office in July. You may want to take a look at that. That's an important letter to share with your people. The key concept here is we've taken a vow of corporate poverty, meaning what we collect goes into carrying the message. So we know what we're collecting. We have to find out what our costs are, and then we have to decide how to divvy it up. And the brochure that was spoken about earlier, the Money and Spirituality Mix, might be a good source point for that. Are we abiding by the seventh tradition? Are we asking ourselves, is the donor an AA member? Having been on the team that originally helped put the online contributions in place for AAWS, it's a highly encrypted, well-written piece. I didn't have anything to do with that, but it's very well written. It asks, yes or no, are you an AA member? For a meeting that's passing the square or something like that, one would assume that everybody's an AA meeting. But before COVID, I went to open AA meetings and nobody read that we were only accepting contributions, the seventh tradition has come very, very much in focus now using technology. And are we protecting our society from outside contributions, which is, again, a large question. Next slide, please. Understanding the role of the treasurer doesn't mean that the role of the treasurer includes being savvy enough to operate or to be able to delineate what exactly is going on with whatever technology we are using in a meeting. Again, you may need an assistant treasurer, or just call it what it is, the seventh tradition collector, and let that person deal with the treasurer. The group bank account versus treasurer's personal account, can't overstate that. Digital payment options, there are as many as they're growing all the time. But the careful understanding of what they do and who sees what they see and when they see it and how it's deposited and what the discount rate is and what the deposit rate is into the bank account, those are the things that you may want to take a look at as the best practice of all. Next slide, please. Traditions 1 and 4 say that we take a group conscience. This is where even people that don't know anything about collecting monies via the internet or any of the small pieces that we're using, they don't know what they're called. They just know that they're the little gizmos that they slide their card in. That's what they're called, little gizmos. They're like minions. They're little, they're yellow. You give them around. Anyway, the group conscience is recommended not only before you do it, but after you implement it. The group conscience or the business meeting is important to say, this is how it's going. Do you want to change? What's plan B? There are a lot of meetings that are still saying, we have a PO box or we have a treasurer, mail us a check. People are actually doing that. Tradition 7 is you can have more than one type of service that you're using. Not everybody has PayPal. Not everybody wants PayPal. You may want to have more than one availability for people to make money available. Tradition 12. Consider the costs and the benefits of each platform. Each service has varying fees. It's up to you to give the group or the meeting what you think is the most beneficial plan, whether it's one platform, 2 platforms, or no platforms. It's really up to you, and let the group ultimately decide. Next slide, please. Technology for the professionals in AA. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but a few years ago when we had the last AA, we had an AA question about how many people are forwarded to AA or referred to AA by people outside of AA. The number in the triannual survey was close to 70%. 70%. We're not talking about just lawyers who are representing people for drunk driving. We're talking about counselors. We're talking about doctors. We're talking about lawyers. We're talking about all kinds of people who know the goodness that AA has done for people who come and stay in AA. They know. They refer. So the General Service Office, bless their hearts, has a very recent technology professional AA press release that they published that says, we may not be meeting in person, but we're still meeting in a different way. And if you have a client or somebody that can use us, here's where you send them. And there you have it. To finalize this, there might be some calls to action that we want to consider. One is the openness the open-mindedness, the honesty that comes with sharing the whole deal. This is the whole deal. It's AA. It's about heartbeats. Are we sharing our issues completely with our home group when it comes to not only having a virtual meeting or a hybrid meeting, but are we also talking about the other things that we do? That we don't serve food, that we don't serve coffee, that we don't pass the book, that we do socially distance, that we do wear masks. I heard somebody in an earlier conversation, in an earlier presentation say, what do you do if you can only have 15 people and numbers 16 and 17 come in? What do you do? Good questions. These are things that need to be talked about. Don't wait until it happens and numbers 16 and 17 get to the door. Do we wish to reconfigure how we work this program during COVID-19? And do we want it to stay for a while until those of us who are over the age of 65 are able to come back to meetings safely, or anybody under 65 is able to come to it? Are we able to ask the big question, is it safe? Is it safe? There was a person who made a comment about contact tracing. I didn't go into that because it's really not an outside issue due to the fact that we hear from all the time that when it comes to the law, they don't stop, the law doesn't stop at AA's doorstep. It goes right in and visits us and says hello. Contact tracing is not something to hurt us. It's not asking if we're an AA member. You can always fill out your name and phone number and say, I'm a part of a community group. There are different ways to answer the same question without bridging anonymity. Let me wrap this up. There's a presentation coming up in a few minutes called The Future of AA Technologies. This is not that. This is about what are we dealing with today and how do we implement the 36 principles, you know, from page 111 in the 12 and 12, and now the hardest question yet, how do we practice these principles in all our affairs? Well, all our affairs is our meetings, our groups, other service organizations, the people that love us and we love them. How do we keep them safe, secure, and anonymous? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Buck. Thank you very much. I didn't want to cut off your presentation to ask for questions because what you were saying probably answered some of the questions that folks have. What I'm going to do for everyone is the questions that came in for Buck, I'm going to put them into the crowdsource notes, and then maybe I'll ask Buck to give his thoughts on them. And if any other people have thoughts on the same questions, they can certainly feel free to participate in that. So I'll try and get those in there shortly. So meanwhile, I suppose we have time for one super fast question, Buck. Just trying to scroll back to the questions for you. There's something here that says, regarding outside contributions, when receiving a check in the mail, do you contact the person who wrote it to ask, are you an AA? What if the check is drawn from a bank, not a personal account, and the person you contact is a third-party check writer, like a trust manager, and they won't give out the giver's info? And we aren't going to ask the third party if the giver is an AA. It's becoming more common, especially with third-party check writing services, where it may not be possible to directly contact the giver.
It's a good question, and I appreciate the question. I'm not an expert, but you know what? The treasurer normally gets that check and brings it in and says, we got this check and it doesn't fall into the confines of what we normally do to the deposit. It's easiest sometimes to return the check with a letter that says, Alcoholics Anonymous only takes contributions from members. If you could identify that person who may be a member, please send back the check. That's a lot of groups do that. So there you go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Buck. So that will bring this particular time slot to a close.